with you out of nowhere. I start hearing these voices in my head that's telling me you do not like your grandmother, you don't love your grandmother, you need to harm your grandmother. Um, Hi guys, this is Lovasia Renee, and this is A Conversation with God. So, before I get into the actual episode, I just want to welcome all newbies and oldies. This is going to be a podcast about growing, healing, and of course, having a conversation with God. We are going to be covering over childhood trauma. We're going to be covering over past identity. Until further ado, let's start the conversation. As you saw, the title of this podcast is my first introduction to Christ. So I want to get right into it. I did not grow up in religion at all. The only religion I knew of when I was young was Catholics. My grandmother grew up as a Catholic, based on like the environment that she was raised in. Um, she was raised around a lot of Italians, so like that kind of was a default religion, I would say. Growing up, I did not practice the Catholic religion. I do remember going to church, and I would bring my dolls and stuff. And while the preacher was preaching, I would be like in the pews playing with my dolls in my own little world. Really did not know or pay attention to the environment I was, because theirs is different from the culture of church that I would be introduced to later on. So theirs is very reading the Bible, very quiet, pastors talking, you go up, you get your bread, you get your wine, or for me, it was a cranberry juice. And then, you go from there. So we would go to church frequently every Sunday. And like I said, I would play with my toys in a pew. And I think the last event was my sister and my cousin, they had this event. I think it's called, it's not called the communion. Okay. So my sister and cousin had a communion, which is where they dress up in like white dresses, they get baptized, all the things. And I literally still have pictures from this day. And I think we went to that. They had that event, and I never got baptized. Come to find out, my older brother never did too. But that was a faith that we would practice. But once that happened, I think I was around maybe like 7ish, that we would stop actually going to church. So as my grandmother got older, she wouldn't really practice it anymore. She would only go for like Easter Sundays and Ash Wednesdays. Again, I did not claim the religion of Catholics, because I still wasn't unsure. Now, my first like actual introduction to the name Jesus Christ, and I can say like the Christianity faith, will be Tyler Perry's plays. Now I know you're thinking like, girl, you was so young. What the heck was you doing watching these? We used to get them on bootleg, literally on a DVD. And back in the day, if you do not know, you're probably too young for this, but we had a man called the DVD Man. And what he do was to bring out all the bootlegs of the latest, newest movies. So if you didn't have the money to go to the actual movie theaters, you had like a hookup with like a DVD man that would literally come to your house and give you like all the newest DVDs or the newest movies for like $5. And like, I don't know, but every single Friday, the DVD man would show up at my house and get my mama like all the newest movies, and she'll literally hit him a 20, and we'll get like 4 movies every week. So at this time, this is when I would actually, this is actually before my first introduction. No, sorry. This is after my first introduction with God. Later on, me watching Tyler Perry's movies will put everything into an understanding for me. So, Sicily, picture it, 1984. I'm joking. Sorry. Okay. So my first encounter, I'm going to say, with God. So like I said, grow up around Catholics, but really didn't understand it because I was so young. So when I was young, I used to play with my toys. So I had like doll houses, all the things. Like, and I would sit in either my room or the living room and just play by myself. Why? Because I was the last of 3. So my mother has 3 kids, and my siblings are like 6 to 7 years older than me. So while they're out running the streets, I'm in the house by myself playing with my toys, because of course I'm the youngest. Nobody's gonna want to play with me. Well, yeah, nobody wants to play with the youngest. So, and for those of you that have like a long distance between your siblings, you know what I mean, right? So at this particular time, instead of me being in the living room, which is where I always was, I was actually in my room. So I'm in my room, and this time I'm not really playing with my dolls. I'm playing with Play-Doh, and what I was doing was making myself a dinner, like a Play-Doh playful dinner. So for some odd reasons, mind you, I do not like peas, but I was making peas because I had like green Play-Doh. So I was like, oh, like what would this be? And I was literally like making little peas and putting them in a bowl. And I can't tell you what the dish I was making. I know it had something to do with peas. But as I'm working on this, I'm sitting by myself. So the way that like my mom's house is set up is when you walk into the apartment, you could look right into the living room. But my mother has this thing that can kind of cut off like the dining room area. So like you'll walk in the house, there's a dining room area, and when you look forward, there's a living room, but there's like a divider, like a little wooden wall that kind of divides it. And then on your right is like the kitchen, my brother's room. And then on your left, you'll walk down a little hallway. It's the bathroom, my room, my mom's room. So I'm in my mom's room. My grandmother at the time, she's in the kitchen, she's making dinner. And I'm sitting in my room by myself. I don't have no TV on. I'm just sitting there minding my BI business, rolling up a little Play-Doh peas. And really out of nowhere, to be really honest with you, out of nowhere, I start hearing these voices in my head that's telling me you do not like your grandmother, you don't love your grandmother, you need to harm your grandmother, um, like she's mean and evil. Mind you, I didn't have an encounter with my grandmother that day. My grandmother honestly was one of my favorite people on this earth. So we didn't have it's not like we had an argument, she told me I couldn't do something, I got in trouble, and then I was like, oh, she pissed me off. No. It was really, I was in my room minding my business. She was in the kitchen cooking, because that's what my grandma did. And as I'm sitting here playing with my Play-Doh, I literally start hearing these voices, and these voices are telling me like to harm my grandmother, and I don't love her, and I hate her, and like all the things opposite of what I've actually felt towards my grandmother, because I had nothing but love for my grandmother. I think everyone in my family, I can actually account to this, admired my grandmother, like loved her so deeply. So for me to hear these voices, and I believe at this time I'm maybe like 5-6 years old. So again, start hearing these voices, and I take a step back, and what I do is something I surprise myself with now that I'm thinking about it. I take my hands and I cover them over my ears. And for those of you that are listening on the podcast, I'm literally covering my ears as we speak. So I'm covering my ears. And as I go to cover my ears, I close my eyes so tight. And I just start saying, Jesus, 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 Jesus. Mind you, being in a Catholic church, it probably did come across, but again, me being young at the time, I'm playing with my toys, I'm not even paying attention. Listen, anybody who knew sitting in them wooden pews, I will either fall asleep or I was playing with my toys, and in that type of environment, they wasn't mad that the kids didn't pay attention. It was more so like they wanted the adults to pay attention. Like the kids, as long as they wasn't loud in the church, they was fine. So, yeah, I remember just hearing these voices that's telling me nothing but negativity and you need to harm her. And I'm like, So I literally am saying, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I kept saying it over and over and over again. My hands is on my head and I'm saying, Jesus, Jesus. And again, guys, I don't know who this Jesus character is at this point, but all I know, something in me is saying if I say his name, it will go away. Like it just came. I remember just saying, Jesus, 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 Jesus. And I'm saying it. And then the voices go away. And I was terrified because I'm like, first of all, where did these voices come from? Second, why is these voices telling me to do something bad to a person that I love? And then third, who the heck is Jesus? Like, why did I have to say that name for it to go away? So I remember after that situation, I got up, I went in the living room, I just watched TV. Like, I didn't pay it no mind. It wasn't until I got a little bit older. So let's say I'm around maybe 8 now. And this is when I get introduced to those Medea plays. So like I said, DVD guy would come around, and what I would do at this point, because I was kind of a loner as a child, like early in my childhood, because again, I was the youngest. So I remember like being in my room, my grandmother brought me like a DVD player, and I had like this little TV, and on the TV, and I know my Gen Zs, you're not gonna know, but I'm gonna need you to Google it. But for my millennials, remember we used to have those TVs and it had the cassette player in with the TV? So it was like a TV and a cassette. So I had that. But the TV also had wires that you could connect a DVD player. So that was the kind of TV I had back in the day. And no, people, it was not a flat screen. It had a little big booty on the back. So if you know, you know. But I remember I used to watch this one play over and over and over, and it was I Can Do Bad All By Myself, the Medium play. And I remember watching it over, and I used to love it because my favorite song was Motherless Child by the little girl. Mind you, I didn't know half of what was being said in there. Now that I watch it, I kind of pick up on it. But back then, I used to just watch it off of just the aura of what I was seeing, and I wouldn't. And I noticed then, like they was mentioning Jesus a lot. So I'm like, okay, this must be somebody in that realm, because again, like being young, I couldn't pinpoint it. But what those plays introduced to me, that there was a God, there was a higher power. Sometimes his name was Jesus, sometimes his name was God. I still did not understand the difference, especially being young that age. But I used to watch those plays over and over and over again, and then and then until then, I'm be really real with you. I still never connected the dots. It still never made sense to me. So as I got older, again, I would be aware that God is around me, but again, since I'm not growing up in a religious household, we don't really talk about religion. Even when my grandmother's going to church for Easter and Ash Wednesday, she's not. I'm not going with her. She's going. She's getting the ash on her head. She's coming back home, um, and that's about it. Like, we never really talked about religion in my household. When I get a little bit older, my sister at the time, so I had to be at least 10 because my sister's 6 or 7 years older than me, so she's around 16. And my sister at the time, she's a Christian. So she's going to church, she's learning all the things, and she will eventually move to the Bronx. So every now and then, like once a month, I'll go spend like a weekend with her. And she was living with her father at the time, and she'll bring me to church. And again, me being young, I would not go in the congregation, I would be where the kids is at. So I remember one time, I think I was either walking to the bathroom, if I remember vaguely, or the way that the church was set up, the kids' room can overlook the actual church. We could still hear the preacher where we was in the kids section, but we wasn't just with the adults. And I remember looking over the window and seeing people dancing and crying and moving. And I was like, oh, this looks really interesting. Again, still do not know. Remember getting older, and I ended up telling my sister that encounter, and my sister, like, she cried a little bit, and then she like prayed over me. But again, don't know exactly what she's doing, because I'm like, okay, I guess that's a thing. It wasn't until I got older and things started happening to me, and I felt a burden on my heart to apologize to God. Just apologize, like, God, I'm sorry for what I did. I promise I won't do it again. And I used to make little deals with God, like, oh, I won't do it for a set amount of time. Eventually, I would do it again. But I didn't know at a young age I was doing something called repentance. Like, I had no idea. I just knew that I always felt sorrowful, especially if I stole something out the store, or if I didn't listen to my grandmother, or if I found myself doing something I wasn't supposed to do with my friends. I just always felt sorrowful. And I think the most thing was I was very scared. So at a young age, I think I was introduced to death very prematurely, and it wasn't communicated to me in a way that was healthy. So the way that death was communicated was like, well, you die. Everyone dies. You can't avoid it. And it was like, you die, that's it. And I was terrified because I'm like, oh my God, like one day I'm going to die and I'm going to be forgotten. Nobody's going to even know I even existed. And if you're overthinking, you know exactly where I'm getting at, how your mind just keeps going and going and going. And that's how I was when I was younger. And I remember every night, it's like the nightfall is so heavy on you. Like during the day, because of the sunlight and the moving and the shaking, your mind doesn't really attack you as much. But at night, my mind used to run me rugged. And I remember being in my household at the time, before my sister moved to the Bronx, my cousin and my sister shared the bottom bunk, and I stayed on the top bunk. And we didn't have TV in the room at the time, and every time it was lights out, y'all. Not even a goddamn on a nightlight was shown. But the way that my room was set up is like, if the windows was open, especially in the summertime, you'll have the windows open to let that cool breeze in at night. The only thing that you could see out my window was like the street light. But you could hear a lot of stuff. And sometimes, some nights it'll be so noisy that it will help me, but some nights it'll be quiet. So I'm going to say like Monday through Friday was the quiet nights, and on them Saturdays and Sundays was them loud nights, or Fridays and Saturdays, because, everybody was outside. So it's either between you hearing glass breaking, people arguing, cars driving by, playing their music 2 o'clock in the morning, or you hear nothing but silence. And the projects, believe it or not, they have their days when they're just completely quiet. But on the days, which was a lot of the days where it was quiet, I remember just laying on my bed crying to God. And for some reason, like I said, I just always felt heavy of anything that I felt was bad. And I didn't know it was really bad. I just knew like it just wasn't okay, right? Like nobody never came and told me directly, because back in the day, I didn't really get caught. You was outside all day, so our parents, they chilling with their friends, and 9 times 10 you kind of not doing anything you want to do, but you're doing a lot to where your parents don't are not aware of what it is you're doing, especially if you're not getting caught. Like now, if you're getting caught, of course your parents know, but if you're able to like slide out with a little candy bar in a store and they don't find out, you're good. But for some reason, I always felt that burden, and I just remember talking to God, having a conversation with him. I didn't know what prayer was, but I remember always opening my mouth and just saying, I'm sorry, God, and can you forgive me, and all the things. And those were like just my little encounters with God as I was young. Now, as I get older, I would still have encounters with God, and I think we all have, to where there was moments that we could have died, right? Like I can remember on a hand alone how many times I could have died, but God was there. Like God was guiding me. God was present, even with me not having a relationship with him. Um, and I think the reason why I avoided a relationship with him, because I did not understand him. And I was the type of person, I'd rather understand first than to believe first and then understand. I want to understand first. I want to understand, like, who are you? How is you? How are you, and you are your son? Like, and what is the Holy Ghost? And how is he? Like, it was just so much questions I had, but I always never turned down having a conversation with God. Even me not knowing the Bible, me never going to church, me never tithing, never did anything of the Christian faith. I wouldn't even call myself a Christian until I was about 25. All right. But throughout my life, so I remember this one time, another encounter with God. So this is how I knew, like, God was with me the entire time, even with me knowing of him, but not knowing him. And I know it's a lot of us that we're in the middle of questioning our faith, and we doubt God a little bit, and sometimes we question him, and sometimes it comes off as we're questioning his existence, right? Because the way we was introduced to religion wasn't in a way to gain relationship. It was in a way of being obedient so I don't go to hell. Like, that's kind of the way it was introduced to me. Like, I do good, God gives me good. Like, you know what I mean? I will later on figure out that that's not how it goes. But I feel like when it comes to Christianity, a lot of us are introduced to it in so many different ways that when we rather just back off from it, it comes off as, oh, I don't believe that. It's like, no, I've had so much different experiences of it. I don't really know what to believe. So like me, again, growing up, these are my encounters so far. Again, I'm not connecting God to a religion or anything like that. I'm just saying, okay, this is a higher being. That's how I'm seeing God. He's a higher being. And for some reason, I have a connection with this higher being. I just have a conversation with him. And my next encounter would be, I remember I was out with some friends at the time, and I got drunk. And I mean, y'all, your girl was out here drunkly dunkly. And I need to start watching The Simpsons. That's noted. And I remember, mind you, I didn't get drunk. I wouldn't say drunk. I'm a light drinker, so I can drink like 2 drinks and I'm like done. So I remember I did get like a drink or whatever. I remember I took like a sip of my friend's drink at the time. And next thing I know, I'm in a car and I'm hanging out the window while the person who is driving, which I don't particularly remember, is doing like 120. And he's racing somebody on the highway. And I'm literally hanging out the car, living my best life. And my friend at the time is holding me for dear life so I do not fly out the car. And I knew right then, now that I'm thinking about it, God was with me. I remember another encounter. And to you, this might not be encounters. For some people, like, girl, you were just lucky. Your friend was holding you. But the girl could have slipped from me. So much things could have happened to where I could have flew out that car. Why? Because I came across an article that actually happened to somebody. A girl was with her friends holding her for dear life. She still like literally flies out the car. So I look at these as like God having an encounter on my life, even with me knowing of him, but not knowing him. I'll share one more encounter that I had. I remember being young. So at this time, and we'll go into like my childhood upbringing, how I had a lot of freedom, and then I went to a place of discipline. We'll go into all of that later on, but I do want to say I was walking from my friend's house, and this is like late at night. So this is late at night. It's probably like 10, 11 o'clock, and I remember walking. And at this time, I did not have a cell phone, but I remember my aunt, who was like my neighbor, but in the hood, we all fam, right? so so she gave me like a flip phone. It was like literally a Sprint flip phone and had like a picture on it, but it wasn't on. And I remember walking home, and as I'm walking home, this car drives up, and it's like a man, a Caucasian man, and he's like, hey, and he's trying to ask me for directions for something. So literally in my heart, I go, God, please, God, please, God. And I remember being told, pick the phone up and act like you're on a phone call. So I literally, mind you, the phone's not on. I picked the phone up, but it was turned on, but it wasn't on. So pick the phone up. I'm like, hello? Yeah, grandma, I'm right here. Mind you, I'm not that far from my actual building where I was living. I was probably, let's say, like a couple feet from it. Like, let's say like 15 feet. And mind you, really dark. Nobody else is around me. And the guy's like, hey, I need directions. Can you come closer? Can you come to the car? And I remember my grandmother always told me, if you ever walk by yourself, you do not stand by the curve. You go as far away from the curve as possible, because it gives them a little bit of fight. They're going to have to really work if they want to take you. So for those looking, never walk by the curve. Always walk as farthest from the curve as you can. So that's what I did. I kind of moved myself a little bit from the curb, and I'm on the phone, and I'm acting like I'm on the phone. But as I'm on the phone, I'm saying like little things. But like when I get quiet, I'm like, God, please, not this. Like, please, Lord, please. Yeah, grandma, yeah, I'm almost here. I'm right here. Yeah, Jesus, please, God. Like, but again, it's just know of his name. And I remember the guy kind of like he ended up driving off once I was like, yeah, like da da da. And I knew that was another encounter with God. But again, I wasn't able to like identify that's what it is. And it wasn't until I got older and I started reading the Bible, Exodus to be exact. And I started to identify, like see myself in that, and to know that God was always with me, even with me not knowing him, but knowing of him through the little moments I was able to be introduced to him. If it was Catholic school, or not Catholic school, but being introduced to that religion, and being in a church, my sister, the plays, like I feel like God was reaching me in different ways because he knew my family just wasn't practicing actual Christianity. So I just wanted to explain like my faith journey, I would say, or my spiritual journey, to be straight up not really familiar with religion. Like I said, I had so many encounters with God that it wouldn't be until later on I was able to really identify, like, oh, that's Jesus Christ. Like, that is the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Wow. But like I said, back in the day, especially when I was younger, even like in my early 20s, I needed to understand to believe. Like, and I was so stubborn on it too. Like, well, I don't understand this, so I'm not going to believe what I don't understand. But the more that you do read and the more that you do get into it, you start to really understand that as you walk and you do the things, that's how you understand. It's by doing. You don't understand just by reading and knowledge. You understand by doing. And I would later understand that I was one of those people that just needed a bunch of knowledge without actually doing it to see if the knowledge that I'm receiving worked. So that's just something I wanted to share with you guys. That is just my background. So like I said, we are going to be diving into stuff. We are going to be having a conversation. Some of the conversations are going to be very tough. And I think it's because, again, it's where I am in my life. I'm in a healing journey. It's a lot of things that I am processing. I do want to point out, though, before we end this, because we're almost there, but before we end this, I really want to come clean. I did not want to do another podcast. I'm so sorry, but I did not. And the reason why is I've watched people's stories. I've watched people's testimonies. And I've always said, God, when is going to be my aha moment, right? Like when I looked at Steve Harvey and he's like, hey, God, if you let me, tell these jokes, I'll tell everybody it was you. And I remember like, Lord, if you just give me whatever, I'll tell everybody it was you. And it wasn't until, so for those of you that know, I had a business. My business was called Snatchies Boutique. It was an antique clothing store. I remember praying to God. So I remember I was done with a government job that I was working over the summer, and the contract was about to be completed. And I said, God, if this is something you want me to do, I need this amount a day to maintain my bills. Mind you, I'm in the bathroom. I'm on the toilet. I'm not ashamed, people, because I have conversations with God anywhere, and I believe you can too. But I'm on the toilet, and right when I said that, an order comes in at the exact amount that I told God I need every day, right? So I ended up moving out of New York. I moved to Pennsylvania. We're here. And this is where my encounter with God got so strong, because me, my husband, my son, we moved from everything that we knew. We didn't know nobody where we lived, and the only person that we was able to lean on was God. We couldn't lean on our own understanding, nothing. And I think when I moved out of my environment that I was so used to, I was able to build my relationship more with God, right? So while I was here, my business was still doing good. I think I hit the peak of my business. I remember I was praying to God, asking for all the things, and he actually gave it to me. But when I hit the peak of my business, and I'm talking about like finances and all the things, I felt so empty. And the thing about it is we sit and we ask, and we think that if we ask for all the things and God gives it to us, we will be so happy. And I remember all the things that I have asked for, he gave it to me, but I was so unhappy. So I took a break, took a step back, and what it did was it grounded me back to a child, to knowing of him, curious about him, but not curious enough to really get to know him. I was still settled in my ignorance of him. Like, I was okay with knowing of him, but not knowing him. But for some reason, this void that I was feeling made me want to know more of him, because I felt like if I knew more of him, I will also understand myself some more, because I was made in his image. So through all of this, of course, we went up and downs, and I will share that later on in a podcast, like us about to be evicted from our house, all the things. Like, we're going to get to the nitty gritty of it. But I remember trying to come back to my business. So I took a break. I tried to come back, and it just was not hitting. It was not hitting. It was not working. It was not doing nothing. And long story to say, when I tried to come back, of course, God did not give me the motivation to come back, but he kept saying podcast in my head. Podcast. And I'm like, Lord, I do not want to do a podcast. I tried to do a podcast before. It did not work. I did a podcast with my husband. It did not work. I tried to do all the things, and it just was not working. And I said, God, I can't do it without you. I need to do it with you. If I'm going to do anything moving forward from this point on, it has to be with you. It cannot be with me, just me alone. And I said, oh, your will, your way. Even if I don't agree to it, God, your will, your way. And I think that's like the first time in my life I actually surrendered what I thought I would make happen, like my dreams come true and everything. I surrendered the most thing I wanted, because I connected my dreams to, if I do the biggest things, then people cannot forget me. So when I die, I won't be forgotten. So a lot of my hustle and bustle for my business to my podcasts was for me not to be forgotten. Like, it was an underlying motive there. So once I failed at it on my own, I didn't want to do it no more, because on my own merit, I already failed, right? So why am I even stepping back in there? Let's try to do something else. What God, I believe, was telling me is, well, you failed on your own, but you're going to succeed with me. So this is where we are, right? We're here at a Conversation with God podcast. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, terrified, because I feel so unqualified to do this podcast. And in the next episode, we'll definitely talk about being qualified, unqualified. But I completely feel very vulnerable, open, and unqualified to do this. So I just want to put that out there. I did not want to do a podcast. This is not my idea. I remember writing a conversation with self and God title in 2017 in my notes, and I'll enter the picture here. But I remember writing that down, and I thought it was going to be for something else, but God is calling me to do this. And again, I don't feel qualified to do this. I don't feel qualified to speak on God, to speak on Jesus Christ, to even disciple. I feel unqualified to do it. But God sees me as qualified. So I have to trust in him more than I trust myself. So that is our first episode. I am so excited and scared, but more excited. Excited to go on this journey and see where it takes me. See what God is doing in my life. See the people that he wants me to actually bless. I believe he gave me a voice for a reason. I just never really understood what he was going to use it for. I just pray that this podcast gives him nothing but glory, and makes him just the popular celebrity that he is. I just pray that it brings more people closer to start that conversation. So if you enjoyed today's episode with all of my up and down storytelling and all over the place, make sure you like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you are listening to me in your car, in the bathroom, wherever it is, honey bookie, I'm gonna need you to subscribe, okay? Or how do they do them things on the podcast? Whatever you do, like it, share it to somebody that needs to hear it. Oh, that was a rhyme. I think I'm gonna be a Christ rapper. Here we go. Okay. But again, thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you that are familiar with my old podcast, I'm back. So I appreciate you, my oldies. Welcome to the newbies. And this is A Conversation with God. Bye.